Brandon Crawford, St. Louis Cardinal.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, coming up on 5 years hosting this show, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. So check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you are following the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And where we get started, it's shortstop day for the Giants shortstop day, as Brandon Crawford has signed a new deal. It is not with the San Francisco Giants, and the Giants have signed a new deal with a different shortstop who has kind of actually a similar profile in a way. But we're going to explain why these moves went down the way that they did. First of all, it was time for Brandon Crawford. Like, I personally kind of thought that he would end up retiring. I did not know how much interest there was going to be after the last couple of seasons that he had. And especially, I didn't see him being a guy who would take kind of a minor league deal with an invitation to spring training and have to fight for a job. I viewed him as a guy who would need kind of more security than that. And that's exactly what he gets here with the St. Louis Cardinals, according to Derek Gold of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, who says that it will in fact be a major league contract. So Susan Slusser was all over this, as was Katie Woo of The Athletic, that the Cardinals were signing Brandon Crawford. Slusser said it was close, blah, blah, blah. And so, yeah, I mean, it's going to be absolutely wild to see him in a different uniform. I feel like even more so than Brandon Belt. I think Belt, for whatever reason, he was more polarizing, right? And so I think there were always people who envisioned him playing for another team someday. But with Crawford, he was one of those, it's like Matt Cain or something. It's just, I wouldn't put him in the Buster Posey category, echelon, but Brandon Crawford playing in another uniform and playing for another National League historic franchise is just super weird. And I'm going to root for him, except when he's facing the Giants, because I live and die with rooting for the San Francisco Giants, to be fully transparent, in case you didn't know that already. But look, I've seen some kind of reactions like as if, this taints his legacy or something. That's nonsense. Total nonsense, because the Giants were not going to re-sign Brandon Crawford. I just think the writing was on the wall. It was obvious from, a couple months into the season that he just was this was gonna be his last year with the Giants, because he was struggling so badly. And, he's 37 years old, and he's not a guy who deserves or would get like a minor league deal, as I said. So you'd be guaranteeing a spot for a guy who is going to be 37 all year. And they tried that. I mean, the last couple of years have just been really tough, and they've got, young players like Marco Luciano, and the time is just kind of now to give a guy like that a shot. Whereas Crawford, you might say, oh, he'd be a good piece, bench bat or something, but he just hasn't been. He hasn't hit well enough. And so to guarantee a roster spot to a guy like that, and then you're in a position where you just cannot like DFA him, because that's just like the ultimate disrespect to a guy who just has been an icon, a legend, a hero, just one of the most meaningful and impactful players in the history of the franchise. And so I don't know what else I can say that hasn't been said already. I remember when he got called up, it was right after the Buster Posey injury with the collision at home plate, and Crawford, was it his first game that he hit in which he hit that grand slam in Milwaukee? I think it was his first game, and that was in 2011. So then in 2012, helps them win a World Series. 2014 helps them win a World Series, and just a great career. I mean, overall, like, he started out as a guy who really struggled to hit, and when all was said and done with the Giants, he ended up being close overall to being league average offensively. And when you combine that with what he was able to do with the glove, especially in his peak, like 2015 through 2018, I mean, those are just some peak years for Crawford where he just put it all together and was just an extremely valuable player. And then also in 2021, the season he finished, fourth in MVP voting at age 34 in 2021. And so many memories, all of them good. Not all of them good. I mean, he struggled at the plate. He really struggled in 2023. He started to deal with injuries. That's another thing. As you get older, like he never went on the injured list, but then all of a sudden he went on the injured list, and then he kept going on the injured list. And so that's like kind of a red flag right there. And another reason you're not going to guarantee a major league contract to somebody. That it's kind of like what I said with Bochy. Like, if you keep him around and you're like a new president of baseball operations like Farhan Zaidi, but you can't ever fire the guy. You just can't, like, even if you want to choose a different manager. And so Bochy kind of reading the room and walking away. And it wasn't just about that with Bochy, but anyway, it's kind of the same with Crawford. Like, it was just time, I think. And so, but he wants to keep playing. So like I was saying, it's just nonsense to say that that this taints his legacy or anything. I haven't seen that a lot, but a little bit of that. And it's just like, he wants to keep playing. The Giants weren't going to offer him even a major league contract in any capacity, in my opinion. And he gets to sign with one of the teams that's one of the like historic franchises in the game. And so I applaud him for getting to continue his career on his own terms. And so good for him. If this is obviously what he wanted, and I'm just extremely happy for him. So he will go down. I mean, he's a legend. He'll have I don't know if he'll have his number retired. There's no statue, there's no Hall of Fame. It's not quite that level for Brandon Crawford. Definitely Wall of Fame, and possibly number retired. I don't think so, though, honestly, because they kind of reserved that for Hall of Famers and made an exception for Bonds. But anyway, I tip my cap to Brandon Crawford, and I'm happy we're going to get to continue to see him play baseball. See him a couple times this year. Hope he's healthy and not necessarily going to start for the Cardinals, but going to serve as a similar situation. They've got a young prospect shortstop, and Crawford kind of provides insurance there, but the difference is it's a major league like guaranteed deal, whereas the Giants made a move today, like right before the Crawford move was announced, where they brought in a veteran shortstop who's known for his glove and not for his bat. The difference being it was on a minor league deal. So we will describe and just discuss who the Giants brought in as essentially Marco Luciano insurance momentarily. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, for me, style, I have purchased many items from eBay Motors. and they've got you covered. They had me covered. They'll have you covered as well. With over 122 million parts to choose from for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. I have never had an issue. Everything has always fit perfectly. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, as promised, the Giants have signed a player. It's a shortstop. And it's a minor league deal. So you might say, oh, it's a minor league deal, no big deal. But I think this actually is somewhat of a big deal because it's kind of like they signed Brandon Crawford. But the beauty from the team perspective is that there's not the commitment and the obligation. It would just be too complicated with Brandon Crawford. So I'll tell you who it is in just a second. But before I tell you that, I want you to know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's now also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. So, who did the Giants sign? They signed shortstop Nick Ahmed to a minor league deal with an invitation to spring training. And oh, by the way, he was already there in the morning. He was there today in Scottsdale. And, you know, it's not Willy Adames. It's not Matt Chapman. I mean, it's not Tommy Edman, right? You know, there was a lot of speculation about kind of bringing in a shortstop. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and act like mad that they are going to give Marco Luciano a shot if, in fact, that's what they end up doing. Because Marco Luciano, I mean, this has been one of their top prospects since he was like 16 years old when he signed as an international player. International, you know, do they call them international free agents? Anyway, he was, I mean, as a 16-year-old out of the Dominican Republic. And he debuted last year. And on my last episode, Everydayers, for those of you who were listening, I commented on a Keith Law segment on KNBR, which I admitted to not having listened to. And I probably went a little over the top, kind of speculating about what he said based on the questions I was asked about what he said. So I did go back and listen to it. And essentially what he said was that he didn't think Luciano was equipped defensively or offensively at this point in time to be a shortstop. He really, I think, meant long-term defensively, like he's not a shortstop, and that currently he's not equipped to be a hitter either, but that he did say that he thinks that at some point he thinks he could be a good major league player, but just not at shortstop. But I do want to point out that there's not consensus there, because, you know, some people act like there's total consensus, and the impression I got from the Keith Law interview on KNBR was that, I don't know, the mind was made up, you know, and also in regards to J.D. Davis, he was like, J.D. Davis I view him as a way below average defender. Well, you have to like have been watching the Giants all season to kind of have seen that J.D. Davis just dramatically improved defensively last year. Those of us who watched, I mean, nobody can watch all the games from every team. It just doesn't happen. And so, you know, that's why a show like Locked On Giants, right, where we're watching every game and we are literally like locked, I mean, figuratively locked on the Giants, has some value. And I mean, a lot of you watch every game too. So you saw JD Davis. Anyway, there's not consensus on Luciano. So ESPN's Kylie McDaniel, who I really respect as a prospect analyst, like a lot, had this to say when he did his top 100 prospects list, when he did a little write-up on Luciano, who he ranked 26th on his top 100 list. He said, as part of the blurb, Luciano has consistently played shortstop in the minors, including in his 2023 big league debut, and he's improved enough now that scouts say he's playable there, with being a strong third baseman as a backup plan, end quote. And so that is a very different sentiment than he cannot play shortstop. He's not a shortstop, and that it was, quote, reckless of the Giants to have the plan be for him to be their shortstop. And I said as much just based on the brief little bit we saw him in the major leagues. Like this idea that he's just horrific there, that's not what I saw. And I've seen horrific defense, and I'll call it out. Like, I mean, I think of, what was his name? Eduardo Nunez. Man, that guy, he always fell backwards. Like, he would often like field a ground ball and then fall on the seat of his pants and make throws there. And a lot of people were like, oh, wow, impressive play. But that's like, no, you shouldn't be falling on your behind while you're fielding a ground ball on a consistent basis. That's a problem. That's not impressive. So anyway, what I saw, Luciano held his own. And I just think that Kylie McDaniel seems a little more plugged in here, where he says scouts say he's playable there with being a strong third baseman as a backup plan. And he also calls him he said, quote, he's a good big leaguer of some sort with outcomes ranging from a boom or bust third baseman with a bunch of strikeouts or a legitimate star shortstop hitting 30 homers a year. And so that gets me excited. And that's why you don't bring back Brandon Crawford on a guaranteed major league contract, because you need to see what you have in Luciano at some point. And so I was calling, like, trade for Willy Adames, and this doesn't say anything about Matt Chapman, because you could still sign a Matt Chapman and have J.D. Davis kind of come off the bench for you and just be like a utility player. I mean, he'd be a good player to have off the bench, but it would kind of stink for J.D. Davis. Maybe you trade J.D. Davis in that circumstance. But anyway, I'm not saying don't sign Matt Chapman. I also have recently said I think that the pitching is the bigger issue, and so I've been like team Blake Snell for a long time. I know he has command issues. I know he throws a lot of pitches and doesn't go deep into games, but when he's pitching, he prevents runs and strikes people out, and those are the things that Ben likes. Ben likes strikeouts, and he likes when you don't allow runs, and that's kind of what Blake Snell does. So anyway, Nick Ahmed, you probably know him from his time with the Arizona Diamondbacks, which is where he spent his entire major league career, and kind of has a similar career arc to Brandon Crawford, to be honest. Not as good, because he never, I mean, not never, but overall, he's been much worse than Crawford offensively. And so you might be like, wow, Crawford was never very good offensively. So you're talking about a guy who's really not good offensively. And that's true. He's been decent against left-handed pitching. So there is some like platoon ability, but Luciano's also right-handed. So we're not talking about a platoon there, but you are talking about a guy who could carve out a role for himself as someone who plays against, I mean, if Luciano were to pull a hamstring or whatever, which he's currently dealing with, shortstop could be a spot. Look, I don't think they have enough depth at that position right now. So adding Ahmed adds depth, and what Ahmed can do is defend. And I retweeted this, but MLB Trade Rumors, in their little write-up of the Giants signing Nick Ahmed to a minor league deal, wrote that from 2017 through 2021, I get it, a long time ago, but I just still thought it was interesting. Ahmed's 58 defensive runs saved ranked fifth among all big leaguers, regardless of position, and his 87 outs above average per StatCast tied him with Francisco Lindor for the most of any player, shortstop or otherwise, in the big leagues. And so in his peak, 2017 to 21, he was legitimately like, you could make a case, maybe not number one, but top five and arguably even number one in terms of just defensive value added. And so to bring in a guy like that on a minor league deal, he's 3 years younger than Brandon Crawford. No guarantee he makes the team. No guarantee. I don't know. Like a lot of the times when you sign veteran players to minor league deals, they have the ability to like opt out instead of going to the minors. And so I don't know how it's all going to work out, but there's no downside. There's absolutely no downside to bringing in a Nick Ahmed to kind of compete at shortstop, push these younger players like Luciano. Tyler Fitzgerald, kind of, I would throw him in that mix. The scouting report on Fitzgerald that I read, because I don't watch a lot of minor league baseball. I'm watching Major League Baseball, and so there's no time really for minor league baseball. But, I was like, what about, Fitzgerald at short? And the scouting report I read was like, essentially he doesn't have the arm for shortstop. And then the game today was on TV and I was watching it, and sure enough, Fitzgerald was playing short, and there wasn't enough arm there. I would immediately have the same take. Like the arm isn't really what you want out of a shortstop. So there you have it. I think it's a work in progress, but I'm excited. I just want them to give real chances to Marco Luciano this year. And I think whether it's at short or otherwise, his time is coming, and we're going to find out what they have in him. And that second part of that sentence, either boom or bust kind of, third baseman or like legitimate star shortstop who hits 30 homers. Like the second part of that gets me excited. I don't know about you. So anyway, we're going to switch gears and talk about JD Martinez and these kind of crazy back and forth reports about the Giants and their offer that they made to JD Martinez that was rejected. And the back and forth on why it was rejected is kind of, I don't want to say fascinating. It's just kind of interesting for sure, because the East Coast reporters versus the local reporters had different reporting on what happened. So we will get into it in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your team wins. And so I'm guessing a lot of you are Golden State Warriors fans. I know they had another game in which they blew a 15-plus point lead the other day against Denver. But their upcoming game tomorrow at the Washington Wizards, they're heavy favorites, man. Minus 650 on the money line, minus 11 on the point spread. And so $5 bet or more on either of those, the money line just if your team wins, the Warriors, and you get 150 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, here we go. We are going to clear up the confusion about JD Martinez and the San Francisco Giants, and also get into the fact that the Giants were interested in this guy. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow we're going to be talking with Javier Reyes from Locked On Padres. And I honestly forget, he has a topic in mind that's very entertaining, and I honestly forget what it is at this moment in time, but it's always a good time with Javier Reyes. If you missed the last show, we did a 2-part episode because we had so much fun. We went long, and it became 2 episodes talking about the least popular players we've on our teams that, like, since we've been hosting. And we got into some names: Tommy La Stella, Hunter Strickland, Sam Coonrod. It was kind of a walk down memory lane in a hilarious way. So more Javi coming up tomorrow. Anyway, the Giants reportedly made an offer to JD Martinez that was rejected. And John Heyman of the New York Post and MLB Network and of arson judge infamy reported that JD Martinez turned down the Giants' offer because I don't have the direct quote in front of me. It wasn't worth my time to pull it up after seeing it before, because it turned out, the local reporters kind of set the record straight. But he said essentially Martinez turned it down because he, quote, didn't want to play there, didn't want to go there. And so, in hindsight, after hearing what some of the local reporters like Alex Pavlovich had to say, and even some other national reporters, it just seems like a reckless kind of assumption that was reported as a fact by John Heyman. So I like John Heyman, regardless, despite all this negative, despite the arson judge tweet and all that. But he's very East Coast. I think he's just not at all connected to the Giants at all. And it seems like where did he get that information from? He didn't want to play there. So Alex Pavlovich and I think it was Mark Feinsand each kind of reported something different, like a different set of circumstances. And I forget who it was, but somebody reported cold hard fact seemingly, which is that the Giants offered JD Martinez 1 year, $14 million. And JD Martinez kind of countered with, and by the way, another Boris client, with 1 year, $20 million. And the Giants didn't want to go there. They thought it was too much. And that was kind of that. And so that's not, he didn't want to go there. I mean, it's that he didn't want to go there for 14 million, but he was fine maybe with going there for 20 million. So, but this was before they signed Jorge Soler. Importantly, it's like the same kind of role that JD Martinez would have filled. Noteworthy that it was the same average annual value as what Jorge Soler ended up getting, 14 million. And so when it comes to the payroll and all that, it would have brought the number for 2024 to the exact same number that Soler brings it to. And so that kind of further maybe enhances the theory that they have this self-imposed cap on spending of around right where they are now, 160 something million. And I just want to point out, because, there's the talk about breaking even, Greg Johnson, Giants, chairman, whatever his title is, guy who runs the business basically and is the public facing businessman for the Giants. He said it multiple times. For some reason, this latest time when he said it, it caught a lot of people's attention. I guess it didn't before, but talking about spending, he talked about wanting to sort of break even, right? And he's, again, said that multiple times. And somebody pointed out that these new jersey patches, which, by the way, they got canned, the other ones got canned. Cruz is done for already, and now they're Chevrolet because the issues with Cruz. I don't know exactly what happened, but with Cruz, but not good things, and so they've changed. The Giants are not going to wear Cruz patches; they're going to wear Chevrolet patches. But anyway, there's income there, and I forget exactly how much, but it's not nothing. I'll have to look into that to see exactly how much. So an additional revenue source should make breaking even come out to a higher number. But at the same time, I have analyzed how pretty much every single year since 2020 was a weird year. Salaries were prorated. Posey opted out. But if salaries were not prorated and Posey hadn't opted out, they'd be right at about 163 million. 2021, that's where they were. 2022, that's where they were. 2023, they went up by $30 million. Oh my God. But then, we have to keep in mind that each team received $30 million from MLB's sale of BAMTech to Disney for $900 million. And so going up suddenly by exactly $30 million. And then this year, right now, where they find themselves payroll-wise, 160-ish, 165-ish million dollars. There's just this clear pattern, and to ignore it is kind of insane. So if they don't make any further additions, then it just really reinforces that they are setting themselves. Yeah, I think they'd probably make an exception, like for the right player. Like if Shohei Ohtani was still available and they had a chance to get him, I don't think they'd be like, no, 165 million, that's it, we're not doing it. I don't know how much higher, but we'll see. There's still some players out there who fit and make sense, would fit and would make sense, like Chapman and Snell, Montgomery. Those guys are still out there, so we will see. But if the Giants don't get any of them, then I think it's pretty clear that they're operating on a kind of somewhat strict budget. And then you can't blame Farhan for that, even though a lot of people, the spending is not Farhan's, like payroll is not Farhan Zaidi's call. That's ownership. And that's not a very high number. It's just not. It's more mid-tier than upper tier. So there you have it. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, Javier Reyes from Locked On Padres. Always a hilarious time coming up tomorrow. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out tremendously. So thank you in advance, and thank you so much to everyone who's done so already. I cannot wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. Today, you are now Locked On Giants.